back, the world's largest oil and gas trader, Shell, has been ordered to reduce its absolute carbon emissions by 45% by 2030. The lawsuit was filed in 2019 by 7 groups, including Greenpeace. The ruling by the Dutch court will affect the company's global operations. Shell says it will be appealing the verdict. Talking to us now from Johannesburg is Greenpeace Africa's Climate and Energy Campaign Manager, Khambule. Thank you very much, Mr. Khambule, for your time. This is a very historic judgment, I believe, by the Dutch court. And I know that Greenpeace is one of the 7, as you heard, that was trying to get the court to get Shell to do this. So what's your reaction to basically yourselves winning in this verdict?
Good morning to all the viewers. The reaction really is that it wasn't just one organization, it was a lot of organizations, including youth constituencies that are fighting for their future. What is really key about the judgment is that it basically tells us now that the courts are now starting to see that the required actions as a result of the science that's coming out around climate change are necessary to also cascade beyond just government, but towards also corporations. And this is a momentous moment where we can now start to see that globally around the world, these oil companies and coal companies are going to be taken to task for what they've been doing over the years.
But this is also a big and historic verdict, Tappy, because of the fact that Shell is the world's biggest fossil fuel company, and 45% by 2030. This is also quite a big deal because of that. But it also has ramifications on other international companies and other fossil fuel companies, doesn't it?
Yes, definitely. It has big implications for not only oil and gas companies, but again, as I mentioned in my previous response, it has implications on coal companies. So companies that have a large carbon output, or rather carbon emissions, as a result of their processes, as a result of their products, or even services. Those companies are going to start having to take the issue of climate change much more seriously than just to greenwash and to signal their actions up to, I guess, 2050 or 2100. Now, the judgment basically says is you have to take the actions as you understand them now, because this thing is quite urgent.
But I also further read an article by an expert who said that this judgment doesn't only mean that Shell has a responsibility on itself and air emissions, but its suppliers as well as clients.
Yeah, so the manner in which the carbon emissions that are associated to a company are calculated, they could vary. In some cases, you look at the carbon emissions from the point of where they come from. So like when you're mining, or when you're retrieving the particular feedstock with the hydrocarbon in it, or when you're transporting it or using it in order to produce a particular kind of product. And in some cases, you could also calculate it at consumption. So it depending on where exactly, this is why we still need to understand the judgment much more fully, is where exactly do we cut off the line? Do we cut it off at consumption, when you start to use the petrol or use the diesel or use the petrochemical, or is it only within the process of extraction and the process of refining, where the actual company has full control as to how the processes will work out? But this is quite a big judgment, because as you notably said, is that it's not only going to affect them internally, it's also going to affect them externally. So now they've got an added reputational risk if they do not address these key issues around their climate contribution.
The articles that I've been reading about this judgment and trying to understand what it means also mentions how, international human rights violations, things such as employees being able to, go to HR and claim for air emission threats or climate change threats because of this judgment.
Yeah, well, that's a new dimension that we haven't seen in a while. I think what we have been able to see is instances of whistleblowing inside of companies, where an employee would come out and say, hey, I think that our processes are not up to scratch, we're not reporting in the right way, or what we're reporting is not reflecting reality. But now there's an added dimension. Again, this is the reason why this is quite key, is that the possibility of a dimension to say that actually we could be doing more, because we do know that we should be doing more. But to bring it back a little bit is that the judgment in itself is actually reinforcing what happened in the Philippines in 2019 as well, where there was a Commission on Human Rights which found that there's about 100 companies which the Philippine people can attribute or can definitely say that they contributed to the situation that the Philippine communities or the Philippine nation is facing as a result of having to deal with climate change impacts such as sea level rise and the erraticness of the extreme weather events. So Shell was one of them, but also even a South African company was also named in one of them. So this is just one of the continuation, or rather one of the other steps that are building from a long history of legal wins around climate change.